The Night of the Red Moon. It was a night of unusual quiet, a stillness that pressed against the senses like a heavy blanket. The date was October 31st, 2023, a night marked by Halloween festivities, but for those in the small, forgotten town of Willow Creek, an eerie calm had settled over the community. Old Mrs. Elderwood, the town's chronicler, often spoke of strange occurrences tied to the lunar cycle. She'd claim that full moons brought out the worst in people, but on nights when the moon turned an ominous red, something truly sinister awakened. Tonight was one such night. A blood-red moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the town. Sarah, a young woman new to Willow Creek, was drawn to the town's peculiar charm, but tonight, as she stared out her window, the charm had vanished, replaced by a creeping dread. A cold wind whipped through the trees, carrying with it an unsettling whisper. She pulled her sweater tighter, a shiver running down her spine. As the night deepened, strange occurrences began to unfold. Animals howled in the distance, their cries echoing through the still night. The wind picked up, rattling windows and doors with an insistent rhythm. Sarah's dog, Max, usually a boisterous creature, huddled at her feet, his eyes wide with fear. Then the power went out. The house was plunged into darkness, broken only by the flickering light of the red moon. A sense of isolation crept over Sarah. She grabbed a flashlight and ventured outside, drawn by an inexplicable urge to explore. The town was eerily quiet. Not a single light pierced the darkness. As she walked, the crunch of leaves beneath her feet was amplified in the silence. Something was wrong, profoundly wrong. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream echoed through the night. It was a woman's voice, filled with terror and despair. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. She followed the sound, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The scream led her to an old, abandoned house on the edge of town. The house, once a grand Victorian, now stood as a skeletal reminder of the past. Moonlight illuminated broken windows and peeling paint. With a deep breath, Sarah approached the house. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of decay. Cobwebs draped from the ceiling like ghostly veils. As she ventured deeper into the house, a floorboard creaked beneath her foot, and a cold draft swept through the room. Then she saw it. In the dim light, a figure stood in the corner of the room. It was tall and gaunt, with eyes that glowed an unnatural red. Its skin was pale and translucent, and its hands were long and skeletal. A scream built up in Sarah's throat, but no sound escaped. The creature moved towards her, its steps silent on the creaking floorboards. Terror consumed her as it reached out, its long fingers extending towards her face. Just as the creature was about to touch her, a blinding light filled the room. Sarah shielded her eyes, and when she opened them again, the creature was gone. The house was empty, save for her own rapid breathing. She stumbled outside, the fresh night air a welcome relief. The red moon still hung in the sky, but its glow seemed less menacing now. As she looked back at the house, she saw a figure standing in one of the upper windows. It was a woman, her face pale and drawn, but her eyes held a determination that defied the horror of the night. Sarah turned and ran, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't stop until she reached her own home, her breath coming in ragged gasps. As she collapsed onto the couch, she looked out the window at the red moon. It was slowly fading, its crimson hue giving way to a pale silver. The night was over, but the memory of what she had seen would haunt her forever. Willow Creek was not the peaceful town she had thought it to be. And as for Mrs. Elderwood's tales of the red moon, Sarah now believed every word. Part 2. The unraveling days turned into weeks, and the memory of that night began to fade like an old photograph. Sarah tried to convince herself it was a nightmare, a trick of the mind played on her by the eerie red moon. But deep down, she knew the truth. Something sinister lurked in the heart of Willow Creek. Then the strange occurrences began again. Objects went missing. Inexplicable noises echoed through the night, and a cold dread settled over the town. People started to disappear, one by one, leaving behind empty houses and unanswered questions. Fear gripped the community, a fear that was as palpable as the autumn chill. Sarah, unable to ignore the growing darkness, began to investigate. She spent countless hours in the town library, poring over old newspapers and local histories. She found references to similar events, always tied to the appearance of the red moon. It seemed the town was caught in a cycle of terror, one that repeated itself with chilling regularity. Her investigation led her back to the abandoned house. The figure she had seen that night, the creature with the red eyes, had become a haunting presence in her mind. Armed with courage and a flashlight, she returned to the house, determined to confront her fear. Inside, the atmosphere was even more oppressive than before. Dust motes danced in the beams of her flashlight, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The house seemed to breathe, its silence heavy and expectant. As she explored, she found a hidden room. Inside, covered in dust and cobwebs, was a collection of old books. One book in particular caught her eye. Its leather cover was worn and cracked, and strange symbols adorned its pages. It was a journal, filled with handwritten entries in a flowing script. The journal belonged to a woman named Alara, who lived in Willow Creek centuries ago. Her entries spoke of a dark entity, a creature of shadow that was awakened by the blood moon. According to Alara, the creature fed on fear, growing stronger with each victim. As Sarah read, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The disappearances, the eerie occurrences, it was all connected to the creature, and it seemed the town was on the brink of a catastrophe. With the knowledge she had gained, Sarah knew she had to stop the creature before it was too late. But how? The journal offered no clear answers, only warnings and desperate pleas. As she sat in the dim light of the abandoned house, the wind howled outside, a sinister symphony that echoed the growing darkness within her. The red moon was rising again, its crimson glow casting long shadows, and as she looked out the window, she saw a figure standing in the moonlight. It was the creature, its eyes glowing with an unnatural intensity. The final confrontation was about to begin. Part 3. The confrontation. The creature stood at the window, its silhouette outlined by the crimson glow of the moon. Its eyes, twin embers in the night, seemed to pierce through the glass, directly into Sarah's soul. Fear, a cold, icy grip, tightened around her heart. Yet a strange resolve had taken hold of her. This was it. The moment of truth. With trembling hands, she reached for the nearest object, a heavy antique candlestick. Armed with this makeshift weapon, she moved towards the door. The creaking of the old house seemed to amplify the pounding of her heart. As the door swung open, the creature stepped into the room. Its form was more grotesque in the dim light, its skin a sickly grey, its limbs elongated and unnatural. Its eyes, those burning red orbs, held a malevolent intelligence. A scream built up in Sarah's throat, but she suppressed it, channeling her fear into determination. She raised the candlestick, her arm trembling. The creature seemed to mock her, its lips curling into a sinister grin. The battle that followed was a blur of movement and shadow. Sarah fought with a ferocity that surprised even herself. The candlestick, though heavy, was no match for the creature's unnatural strength. Yet, she managed to inflict a few glancing blows, causing it to hiss in pain. The room was a chaos of overturned furniture and shattered glass. With each passing moment, Sarah felt her strength waning. The creature was closing in, its movements growing faster, more predatory. Desperation fueled her final stand. She lunged at the creature, her candlestick aimed at its heart. In that moment, time seemed to slow. The creature's eyes widened in surprise as the candlestick plunged into its chest. A piercing scream echoed through the house, a sound of pure, unadulterated evil. The creature collapsed, its body convulsing violently. Then, with a final shuddering breath, it was still. Exhausted and trembling, Sarah collapsed to the floor. She had done it. She had defeated the creature. But at what cost? As she lay there, catching her breath, she realized that the battle was not over. The evil that had plagued Willow Creek for centuries might not be entirely vanquished. The first light of dawn was beginning to creep through the windows. A new day was breaking, a day filled with uncertainty. But as Sarah looked at the lifeless body of the creature, a flicker of hope ignited within her. Perhaps, just perhaps, Willow Creek could finally find peace.